UFC 159 here at SBRForum Videos. I'm Peter Loshak. Sitting next to me is Nick Kalikas, professional MMA odds maker, and his website is MMAoddsbreaker.com. And joining us over the phone, we have Brad Taschuk, who is also a writer for MMAoddsbreaker.com and a contributor for Sportsnet.ca. All right, let's talk about the last fight on the main card, which is lightweights, Pat Healy and Jim Miller. And these guys are, Miller's obviously a huge favorite, minus 350. Pat Healy is plus 250. On the other side at 5 dimes right now. These two guys are kind of very similar fighters, with most people considering Miller to be a notch better. At this point, Healy's coming in off of 6 straight wins at Strikeforce. I don't know. I guess it's just a matter of if you think that Healy's momentum will carry into this fight, and he might have some value at plus 250. Brad, what do you think?
I actually think he does have a little bit of value here. Miller, he's the better striker. He's probably better in scrambles and with the submissions, but Pat Healy's going to come in. He's going to be way bigger than Jim Miller, and I could almost see it playing out a little bit like the Gray Maynard-Jim Miller fight, where Miller can't really get it to the ground, so he's got to rely on just his striking, and I think, you know, if he goes to that route, then Healy can put him on his back, and he's a great grinder. You know, in his last fight against Kurt Hollabaugh, he showed that, you know, he's able to stay on top of a guy for 3 rounds, win weird scramble positions, and just wear a guy out. So Healy, I think he's a little bit more of a live dog here than people think.
Yeah, these kinds of fights are always tough, where you have like a big favorite and you agree that the favorite should be a big favorite, but not quite as big as the lines are giving him credit for. Those are tough fights for me to bet. Yeah. Where'd you open this, Nick?
Exactly. I opened at 3-1. Now it's at 350-ish or so. So the public is coming in a little bit more on Miller, and I figured, because I opened the line too high, honestly, right. Because it should be under 2-1 really for Miller or ballpark around there. So just by that alone, there might be some value in Healy. I mean, it's another one of these dogs in past situations. I hate to be negative against the favorites, but I mean, realistically, the way the matchmaking is for the UFC, that's why you're seeing so many favorites get beat. A lot of players on the forums and various websites are complaining that, there's so many favorites going down lately. It's a matchmaking, and there's a lot of overhype going on. I mean, the majority of my lines are too high, and sure, a lot of those favorites are going to come through, but several of them are getting picked off, and people are shocked afterwards. Well, this could be another one, because let's face it, until his last fight, honestly, with Joe Lozon, I think that Jim Miller started declining bad. It was nice to see him come back and perform like he did, because that was a great fight against Joe. But before that, he was just disappointing, even in his wins. He was getting, he got actually dominated by Nate Diaz. And that's a surprise, because he should have had several advantages in that fight over Nate. So, and that, I'm not saying that that's a bad loss, because Nate is definitely, even with coming off that bad loss this weekend, he's definitely one of the top guys in the division for sure. But Jim Miller just hasn't looked that great. Now, Healy, you just mentioned it. He's been on a 6-fight win streak. I mean, the guy, if you look back at Healy a few years ago and you look at him now, he's a different fighter. He's training a lot better. His cardio's better. His stand-up, which I think it has been horrible in the past, is actually somewhat effective at times now, which is surprising, because, I don't picture Healy as being a striker at all. But now if you look back at some of his footage in his recent fights, he's starting to pick up the pace with his strikes a little bit. He's starting to find the spot with his strikes a little bit, and he's mixing it in good with his strengths, which is his wrestling and his grappling. Well, that happens to be Jim Miller's strength as well. So they match up pretty good. And like Brad said, Healy's going to be a little bit bigger, physically. So if Miller can't get the fight to the floor, I wouldn't be surprised if Healy does mix in a takedown or two. But the point is here in this fight, Miller, you got to respect him, because he's the better striker in this fight. His wrestling should be able to keep up fine with Healy, even if he is a little bit smaller. And his BJJ is actually a little bit better than Healy as well. So, and you have to give the edge to Miller on the feet, I think, still, because he's more aggressive. His technique is definitely a lot better. He's faster. But at 3-1, 350, do you lay it?
Too much.
I
don't know.
No, I can't. I just can't do it.
Why then do you think that the public has been betting Miller then?
Because, what he's accomplished in the UFC, and now Strikeforce fighters, let's face it, even WEC fighters, when they first merged the companies, they weren't getting any respect. Strikeforce fighters, the same thing. They've done relatively well against the UFC fighters. So that's one thing that, for some reason, Zuffa's done a great job brainwashing everybody that UFC is the best fighters always fight in the UFC. That's not true. Where does the UFC get these fighters? From some of the smaller promotions that turn into their champions. And a lot of these guys, WEC fighters, are now champions in the UFC. Strikeforce fighters eventually could, follow suit. So I think it's definitely a lot more competitive than line indicates, and You got to either go with a dog or pass. I think if you're going to bet it, there's going to be a prop. I'm not sure what the line is right now, but Healy by decision. If he wins, that's how it's going to be. I think Miller has a shot at maybe stopping him inside. Again, with his strikes possibly. Healy's a tough guy, but he has been stopped with strikes before as well, or even a submission. I mean, if Healy makes a mistake, Jim Miller's submission game offensively is so good that he could possibly finish it. But if he doesn't, then Healy could win a decision.
Wow, now I'm sold on this one. My official pick on this one, Pat Healy, plus 250, based entirely on what you guys both told me. All right, thanks so much, guys. Great preview as always.